There are many ideas that surround the Magians, yet without them we would not have concepts such as magic and those who are sacerdotal, being assigned spiritual, priestly duties. The healing side of the ministry became well renowned and respected, but other aspects were often frowned upon when outsiders visited their lands and kingdoms. Much is known about them thanks to the Zoroastrian faith, but they actually preceded them, and it is this aspect that fascinates me. The ancient Persians had a term, magush, which became known as magus and magi in the Greek language. They were often found in the courts of rulers in Persia, being tasked with religious duties, interpreting dreams, being astrologers, astronomers, the only people able to officiate sacrifices, having knowledge of fire, instructing people about purity of air, earth, water and fire, having knowledge of herbs, plants, etc., leading them to be renowned healers. They are frequently depicted as wearing a turban-like mask and holding a barsan, a collection of branches, twigs that were from sacred plants, trees. It's important to note that they were not priests per se, but rather administrators, overseers of religious practice and protocols. The presence of the Magians predates Zoroastrianism, as mentioned before, and continued through the ages in Persia until approximately the 3rd century AD. This was chiefly due to the conquest of their lands by Alexander the Great. What of their ancestry though? Well, this is what I'd like to explore with you now. Having traced cultural links in parallel to the emergence of religious ideas, I have discovered that there's some confusion as to whether they are a tribe, caste or type of person. The accounts of external cultures often try to consolidate their identity, but not very successfully. However, they do aid one to make their own conclusion. Heraclitus of Ephesus insisted that they were sorcerers, whereas Aristotle of Stagira says they are not. Xenophon explains that they are experts in religious matters, hymns to the rising sun and all known gods. Herodotus notes that they deal with matters relating to death and sacrifices. Pseudo-Plato says that they belong to a cult of Zoroastrians in Persia. And Yakut Rumi identified the founder of Zoroastrianism as a Magian himself. In the Parthian and Sasanian empires, the Magians, they were judges, tax collectors and had political powers. So there's a lot of information to sift through. Some clarity can be found by viewing them through the lens of Zoroastrianism, of which they undoubtedly had influence. It may interest you to know that Jewish wise men Daniel, Meshach, Shadrach and Abednego were invited to discuss and learn with them, which influenced the editing of the Jewish texts Torah, when Ezra made some revisions. They are also mentioned later in history when Jesus is born, which reflects the importance of Zoroastrianism within Judaism. It can also be argued that Judaism is in fact a syncretic religion which developed from Canaanite Yahwehism and Zoroastrianism. There are some truly wonderful resources around now to help you make your own conclusion, and I encourage you to look and ponder at your leisure. As for my own supposition, I will guide you through it now. I started by asking the question, where did religion come from? This led me down a series of kingdoms, countries, ages and cultures, where I was able to trace the roots of many religious concepts and ideas. The most curious thing I found is that shamans and Zoroaster had significant impact on religious beliefs. The Ice Age also played an enormous part in the formation of our early journeys, which brought about dispersal of humankind and psychological growth. It is my personal view that the following is the journey humans undertook which helped develop the idea of, and relationship with God. As human consciousness awoke, we started to ask questions about where we are and where we came from. For the most part, we were hunter-gatherers, moving with the seasons and gradually noticing the relationship between the stars, seasons and migratory patterns in nature. During the Ice Age, the animal population remained steady until an abrupt period of warming occurred which is known as the Bowling Alaret. During this period, animals of the late Pleistocene spread northward into regions far more northerly than usual. When this period ended, many species were forced back south or become regionally extinct. This meant that humans followed the animals north, then south, throughout this period. When returning south, humans re-entered the European forests in search of large game, hunting them to near extinction. In the south and far east, the Neolithic had begun, and in the Middle East, The pre-agricultural Natufian culture settled around the east coast of the Mediterranean and made use of the large cereal crops like emmer, barley and other wild cereals. Where humans had decided not to stay and moved, there were those who did stay and they adapted to their surroundings. The traveling hunter-gatherers who returned from migrating north over cumulative generations had to adapt to the changes which had been embraced by those who remained. However, in the Middle East, certain changes linked with gardening and pre-agricultural techniques were in place. This was called forest gardening and it happened at various places over the world. Through forest gardening, they realized that they could introduce new species and they would grow in the gardens. This style, in the Middle East, was the forerunner of such concepts like the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Through the gradual process of people improving their environments, useful species of tree, vine, plants and in some cases animals also, were identified and protected and undesirable species removed. Those who remained in their homelands had developed this system, and to the returning hunter-gatherers who still held on to their egalitarian, hunter-gathering ways it was a challenge, similar to cognitive dissonance. This would have led to conflict and challenges in the communities, and I firmly believe that this is reflected in the scripture of Genesis, which in part is influenced by Persian thought as previously mentioned. In the 3rd millennium BCE, texts of Sumer indicate that they were considering what was better, cattle or grain, winter or summer, birds or fish. It's as if they were having philosophical debates about what was better, with amicable results. I think this reasoning was displayed to the returning generation of hunter-gatherers and they were invited to live with them. However, the hunter-gatherers preferred the traditional ways, taking from trees, hunting animals, etc. So, I believe that they were allowed to live in a forest garden, more than likely Gan Eden, with the hope that they would eventually become civilized. They are taught how to shave, use clay for depilation, and taught the values of right and wrong. To the hunter-gatherers though, everything belonged to everyone, but the cultured hosts say, no, no. We don't take, we ask or we grow our own. This is something that causes quite a stir with the hunter-gatherer returnees and again is reflected in the Garden of Eden narrative. Now one of important things here is that when our hunter-gatherers migrated north, they developed the idea of one among their tribe being a shaman, one who knows. This person knows about astronomy, astrology, what plants are good food, poisonous and good for healing. They display knowledge and wisdom which is ageless and has grown over generations. This knowledge has traveled and increased over time and through many lands. The country they now reside in, which used to be their home, has also developed and changed to be civilized, with new concepts of ownership, right and wrong, and, what is soon to be called, religion. To resolve the problems, something happens along the lines of a challenge, like whose offering from the harvest is the best. As a result, the shamanic-like persons of the hunter-gatherers and the cultured hosts lead the offerings, and it is this that unites the spiritual thoughts. As a result of the outcome, those who lost agree to move eastward. This is when the Indo-Iranians and Vedic Proto-Indo-Europeans, PIE, split. They have similar ideas but different enough to divide them. The PIE later become the Hindu and the Indo-Iranians become the Persian Medes. From this comes another identity also, the Magians, those who know the history, wisdom and knowledge of how to make offerings, heal, counsel and watch the heavens. So in effect, Magians are civilized shamans. At first it is a type of person, and the name is synonymous with ritual, healing and sacrifices, but with the development of castes, it also becomes a class. The egalitarian ethos of the hunter-gatherers also permeates through the Median Empire, for when they conquer a land, they are inclusive of their new subjects' belief systems. Then there comes a time when Zoroastrianism has a revelation, that there is one God above others. I suspect that he knew of Gan Eden and it being a garden walled by mountains and an extinct volcano rises above the others and is like a bridge between where God, the gods live and humankind. This idea is an echo from the earlier Sumerian notion that there is a hill situated at the place where the heavens rest upon the earth. In fact, the word for hill is from the Sumerian Eden, meaning step. An idea of a forest garden paradise being near God, walled by hills and mountains, doesn't seem so far-fetched now, and Zarathustra, that's Zoroaster, begins his mission to explain that there might be other gods, but there is one God over all. As his philosophy grows, it explains free will and the choice we have between good and evil. These ideas have a huge impact on contemporary thought of the time, and shortly after Zarathustra comes a man out from Ur. His name is Abram, and he too believes in one God, and thus the heritage of monotheism progresses. The Magians, who are not just modern shamans anymore but also a caste, begin to police the religious activities and maintain the wisdom and knowledge of how to keep things pure, heal, sacrifice and the suchlike. And I believe that they are the descendants of the hunter-gatherer shamans who returned from a northern sojourn to their homelands. Evidence of this can be found, I believe, in the previous cultures of the Sintashta, the Yamnaya, who had a genetic heritage of eastern hunter-gatherer and Siberian genes, the Ubaid and Halef Ubaid, who were the first civilizing influence in Sumer. The Natufian, who were hunter-gatherers but also had settlements like the one at Jericho. One may argue that shamans wouldn't exist in the Middle East at this time, but graves have been found in Galilee, including one of a female shaman, that indicate shamans, or the equivalent, were around the Middle East at least around 12,000 years ago. The search to understand our relationship with the universe and God started with observing nature, the stars and seasons. If the observation of Genesis is anything to go by, it would seem that God preferred us to live like this, relying on God for all our needs, traveling with the migratory patterns of animals, and didn't want us to be civilized in towns and cities. However, humans have made a compromise between knowing God and civilization by creating religion. This compromise was enabled by the Magians, who knew how to make sacrifices, offerings, healing, and were entrusted with this through the Persian culture. They became part of the Zoroastrian faith, and beyond this were the esoteric schools of major organized religions. The Sufi endeavor to be doctors to humanity and search for the experience of God, and they are the current evolution of the entrusted. Yet anyone who searches for understanding God and discovers the gift and magical ability of faith is also one of the entrusted. Therefore, I believe that the Magians are just one of the ways our spiritual heritage has been sustained since we, as a race, first awoke and became conscious.